Alright guys, we have one more passage here on the test nav deal. This one is a kind of a longer one about the Harlem Renaissance. Honestly, if you want to play along at home and do this yourself first, you're gonna need to read it. I'm just not gonna do it here on the video. You could load up the audio version. Again, I like 0.75.
The Harlem Renaissance. 1. Between World War I and the Great Depression, two of America's
Oh, where did she go?
most devastating events, an important cultural movement began to evolve, in the heart of New York City. Beginning about 1920, it was called the Harlem Renaissance.
See, I was just doing that to listen to the pace. Sorry, I'm just kind of playing around here.
Renaissance. Its name reveals its similarity to the European Renaissance.
Yeah, it's way too fast. Don't ever go above 1.
A golden age of art and literature during the 14th to 16th centuries.
That already feels a little too fast. I'm telling you, man. I know some of y'all have no idea. Some of y'all don't use the audio software on the real test, but if you do, let's pump that 0.75 in there. Like I like that a lot. That's what I would do, at least if I were you. Play around with that in class today when I'm not here. All right, directions. Read it anyway. I'm not gonna read the passage right now. Which word best replaces evolve as used in paragraph 1? And remember, on the real test, there's not going to be it's not going to be an underliner this year. So you just need to highlight and do your thing. All right, an important cultural movement began to Alright, so let's do it. What does adapt mean? Adapt means to change. Nah. Begin to develop. That makes sense because it's new. It's not going to increase. It hasn't existed yet. And yeah, mature makes no sense either. Yeah, so develop is our correct answer. All right. Paragraph 4. Sorry, I'm reading this silently, which doesn't make for engaging video. Many African Americans looked northward for the chance to rebuild their lives. It's 2:30 in the morning, by the way. It was a trend that had begun after the Civil War, when newly freed Southern slaves had moved north, hungering for opportunity. Huh. So as a reader, I'm like, they're moving north, hungry for opportunity. Okay. After World War I, African Americans again gravitated to the larger northern cities. Harlem, a large neighborhood in New York City, appeared to offer the kind of fresh start they were seeking. In fact, by the early 1920s, African Americans in Harlem had grown into a large but closely knit community. Conditions were not ideal, but the African American residents of Harlem shared similar cultural, social, and artistic values. Among the thousands attracted to the possibilities of Harlem was a select group of highly gifted artists who turned this Dutch village into a hub of creativity. Okay. It says condition. I'm just evaluating the choices one at a time. It says conditions were not ideal. So that does not mean it has pleasant living conditions. Oh, crud. There we go. All right. Artists living in Harlem were inspired by their common background. It says they shared similar cultural, social, and artistic values. Sounds right. Alright, cool. Let's go to the next one. In northern cities, African Americans easily found jobs that paid well. The word easily really kind of jumped out at me there. I don't know if that sounded fishy to you guys too, but because it says like looking for a chance to rebuild their lives. If you're looking for a chance, like, that easily freaks me out there. I'm gonna say it's not. I don't know. I'm not ready to cross it out yet. Many former World War I soldiers it doesn't say anything about soldiers settling there. It says just people in general went there after a war. Northern cities offer African Americans more advantages than southern cities. That sounds very similar to this one, except this one says the word easily. So I like that one and that one. Yeah, those are right. Cool. I am checking my answers too, by the way, guys, just so you know. I'm building a little drama, but I do actually know the answers to the questions. Again, you see the process there is just kind of like, it's a process of elimination. It's evaluating every single choice and just doing the best you can. All right. Organization in literature and art abound. Let's see. Where's that part? All right. Despite the power and influence of jazz, the foundation. All right. Ralph Ellison, Zora Neale Hurston. Alright, so I'm looking at the choices. Supports the author's purpose by listing examples of writers and artists who shared their talents. That kind of sounds like exactly what they're doing here. Like poet Langston Hughes, County Cullen, painter Jacob. I don't see how A is incorrect, but we'll just be good. We'll just be good test takers. Comparing and contrasting. Nah, they're not saying like poets are better than trumpet players or whatever. They're just not saying that. Ooh. C could be good. Let's see. You know, you would have thought maybe they'd have done C. Like where it says explaining the effect of the writers' and artists' works on society and talked about how it affected people. That might have been cool, but they didn't do it. They just listed a bunch of people. Order of importance. Nah, they're all just listed up in there. Yeah, they're not listed by order of importance. So yeah, it's just a list of a bunch of it's a list of a bunch of artists, guys. All right, number 20. Which word is an antonym? These are the questions that, honestly, last year the kids hated, but this year kids are doing fine on these. I think it's the increase of Achieve 3000 practice. Which, if you haven't read, I found a good article about Taco Bell. Put it on, Chief. It's about whether or not they should bring Taco Bell to Mexico. The hot button issue in my world. All right. So we got to look at paragraph 9. The convergence of talent that spontaneously came together during the Harlem Renaissance was nothing short of amazing. All right, so the convergence. Let's act like I never heard this word before. Convergence. Spontaneously came together. Okay, cool. So converging means coming together. So the talent that came together, they converged during the Harlem Renaissance. So the opposite of coming together is separation. That's your correct answer. It really is, though. And the only way you could do process of elimination would be to like just look at what you think the word means and then be like, wait, hesitation is not the opposite of coming together. Alteration, that just means changing something. I don't know why the red X didn't work. And then you're stuck with separation. Honestly, the hardest part about this sometimes is just using your context clues to first figure out what the word means. Write that down so I remember to talk to you guys about that. But yeah, figuring out what the word means first and then doing your thing. All right. Select all of the words that do not contribute to the author's tone of admiration. Okay, so paragraph 11 is the last paragraph. It's all admiring. It's like citizens are entitled to a chance at greatness. So, all right, so what I'm going to do is if a word does show admiration, it shows that they admire something, then I'm going to exit out. So the enduring knowledge means it's stick around forever, we'll exit out. Citizens are people. Everybody's a citizen, whether you admire them or not. So that does not contribute to the, oh crud. That does not contribute to the tone of admiration. This one's so hard because the correct response is indicated by using your pointer tool to cross out the answer in blue. But I want to use process of elimination to red X out the answer that's not the thing that should be crossed out. I don't know. I talked about this type of questions with some kids the other day, and they looked at me like I was a crazy person for thinking it was super confusing. So maybe it's just me, but I think this question's insane. So greatness, because it's like a double negative thinking, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's what. So greatness does contribute to the tone of the author's admiration. So it's a wrong answer here. Okay, cool. Let me do what I would told my kids to do. Does not contribute to the tone of authors. Supply. I got a big supply of paper clips in my desk, but I don't really admire them. Maybe it's a dumb example, but I actually don't have I don't have a big supply of any school supplies by this point of the year. Treasures, yeah, this was a treasure. This was, yeah. And how is shining used? America's most shining moments. They admire that. Cool. Right, the main idea of the section. Alright, so this was the end of the whole thing. So the whole thing, right, about this part is that the Harlem Renaissance was the beginning of people having creativity and expressing themselves and stuff, and that people respect everything that they did. So our right answer is D right there. The main idea of this section is not America being in crisis. The Harlem Renaissance declining is one little part, but look at the whole last paragraph. It's like the enduring knowledge, blah, 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 all that stuff. And A is your second best answer, but A does not talk about how their ideas and values are still around today and inspiring people, whereas D does. All right, Center for Growth in Jazz in America. Harlem had nightclubs where musicians played jazz. Well, yeah, that makes sense. So it says, which detail best supports the idea that Harlem was a center of growth for jazz music in America? It would make sense that people would play jazz if they were jazz there, so I'll leave A. The musicians were known for improvising. Okay. I really love these choices. Famous jazz musicians pursued their careers in Harlem. And D, jazz helped musicians in Harlem express themselves. Okay. Alright, so it's a growth of jazz music in America. And it's going to grow. So famous people pursued their careers in Harlem because that's where it's growing out of. Yes, the right answer. The other things were just minor little details. Alright. Which three details should be included in a summary of the article? So if I were just asking you, hey, what's this article about? Well, alright, it's 2:45. Stick with it. 2:45 a.m. right now. I feel like I'm actually more serious at 2:45 a.m. though than I am at 9:30 a.m. Right, the Harlem Renaissance had to. So this article, right? If you're summarizing the article, somebody just goes, "Hey, what's this article about?" You're not going to talk about the European Renaissance. It's not what this article is about. But being residents of Harlem in a close-knit community, that sounds important. We'll leave that for now. Talented African-American artists caused a revival of art and culture. That sounds like what the whole thing was about. Jazz originated in New Orleans. No. This article is about the Harlem Renaissance. I'm not falling for that. I know that was one little part in the beginning or whatever. All right. So 3 details. Did y'all even remember that it was a Dutch village? Like, if you look at these, what's more important? The African American residents were there and it was a close-knit community? Yeah, it sounds important. The talented African American artists, musicians, a revival of art and culture, of course. And then, so if you're down to the last 2, would you rather know when this huge event in American and world history occurred? Or would you rather know that it was a former Dutch village? I think you would rather know when it occurred. So there's your process of elimination there. In terms like summary, we've just been writing summaries all year, like the The way they can ask a question can be kind of dumb sometimes, but y'all can do that. All right, number 25, fact versus opinion. All right, we talked about this the other day at one of the stations we did in class, in B-Day at least. So I'm writing down this question number. All right, so fact versus opinion. All right. Was the thing called the Harlem Renaissance? Yes, that's a fact. I need to drag them. I didn't bring my mouse home. All right. Instead, this artistic awakening. Have I showed you guys the nuh-uh trick? I think I've shown that. All right, so here's my thing about fact versus opinion. If it's a fact and you say nuh-uh afterward, you're going to sound just completely ridiculous. But if it's an opinion, you can be like, nuh-uh, and you can argue back and forth. So if you're like, Eagles are the best team in the NFL, nuh-uh, the Patriots are better because even though they lost this year, they still won, blah, 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 blah. And then if you just come back and you're like, well, the Eagles beat them in the Super Bowl. And the Patriots fans like, no, then they sound dumb because you're just arguing facts or whatever. So if you're like, oh, this food is gross, you're like, no, I like it. But if you're like, oh, this food was super cheap, it only cost $1 for 6 things, and you're like, no, that's not what I paid. Like, you couldn't do that. So let's just do it with the real examples. All right. It was called the Harlem Renaissance. No. Yeah, dude, it was called the Harlem Renaissance. That's a fact. That's what they called it. Okay. Instead, this artistic awakening was created exclusively by African Americans and it occurred at the perfect time. No, it wasn't the perfect time. It should have happened like a bajillion years earlier, man. Timing was terrible or whatever. I don't know. So that becomes an opinion. Now, it was a fact until the perfect time part. All right. In 1920, America was ripe for change. It needed a renewal of hope. No, everybody already had hope, dude. Everything was fine, man. That's going to be my fact versus opinion argument guy voice. Mostly like sports talk radio. All right. African American writers such as Ralph Ellison and Zora Neale Hurston provided their own observations of African American life. No, they didn't observe life. What are you talking about? Yes, of course they did. That's what they did. They wrote about lives. They were African Americans, and they provided their own observations about it. That's what they did. That was their job. Like I don't even know what to tell you, man. They were writers, and that's what they wrote. That's what they did. No, yeah, that's what they did. All right. The heritage of the Harlem Renaissance is alive and well, however. No, it's not. I never heard of that. My teachers never told me. I don't know. Yeah, apparently our arguing fake opinion man also doesn't listen in school either. All right, so there's your correct answers. The not-on test is my totally ridiculous way of doing it. But basically, if it's a fact, it's going to have stuff like statistics or just real factual information. If it's an opinion, it's going to have words like adjectives, maybe like words like perfect, stuff like that. All right, last question. What visual aid would be most effective for an oral presentation on Langston Hughes' contributions to the Harlem Renaissance? All right, a timeline of his life. Who was Langston Hughes? Let's say we didn't know that. Let's say you didn't know from last year that he was a poet. I think you learned that in 7th grade history. But even if you didn't, gifted poet Langston Hughes. So if you're really trying to learn about like a poet, right? I don't think you would come up to do a presentation and like behind you on the screen or whatever, you would have a list of other people that were authors he looked up to. It doesn't make sense. You could have a picture of him as a young man, but everybody's gonna be like, oh, cool, he's a dude. And it's a really old picture from the 1920s. What about if you're trying to say he's a really good poet? What if you put one of his poems on the screen and people could kind of look at it while you were reading? That sounds kind of cool. And then a timeline. Ain't nobody got time to look at all that. We're talking about his poetry anyway. Scoop. There we go. All right, so I've worked through a 26 question practice test. You guys can go refer to any of them you have questions about. Let me know what's up. And y'all are going to kill it. Just, yeah, take your time. Use your strategies. It's 2:52 in the morning, so I'm done. See ya.